All right, we're back at it with Unit 11, Day 1. We're going to be talking about polynomials. That's the whole unit's focus here. When we talk about polynomials, let's get right into what they mean. They're just terms connected by addition and subtraction signs. Addition and subtraction signs. So anytime you see a plus sign or a minus sign, it's splitting up a term with another term. So what is a term? This would be a number by itself or a number with a variable connected to it. Those are what terms are. So those are always the pieces of our equations and our expressions are these things called terms. So how many terms do we see in this next space? So it says how many terms are there in A? Well, we have this 2x, we have this minus 3x, and we have a plus 4. So if you notice, I see that there's a plus sign and a minus sign separating the terms out. And then that sign always goes with the number that's to the right of it. So there's 3 for this one. For this 5x minus 1, I have a 5x, and I have a minus 1. So that should be 2 terms right there. And then 3xy, I don't see any plus or minus signs, so there's only 1 term. So those are how many terms we have for those 3 examples. The blank, and this is the degree, is the highest exponent you see. So the biggest exponent you see in the problem is always going to be your degree. And that's always the little number in the top right. So when we're talking about 4x to the 5th, the degree would be a 5. If we just say negative 1/2 x, that's to the first power. So that would be a 1. For this 5, I don't see a variable with an exponent, so that degree is 0. This one that has this number up in the right corner, that would be a 3. So those are all your degrees. So now we can name expressions based on their degree and how many terms they have. Okay, so we can come up with specific names for those. So if we have something raised to the the 0 degree, like this number 5 that we had for C, okay, what would we call that? Well, we would call that a constant because it doesn't change. It doesn't have a variable attached to it. There's going to be nothing that changes that 5 to anything else because there is no other variable, no other exponent. Anything to the first degree, we call those linear equations. So that's something that we graphed a lot. So like when we had y equals 2x plus 1, y equals negative x plus 3, anything with an x to the first, we always created a line for us when we graphed it. Anything to the second degree, we're going to learn about at the end of this unit, the end of this chapter semester. It's called a quadratic equation. Okay, so anything to the second degree, we call it quadratic. Anything to the third degree, we name that as a cube or cubic. Fourth is named quartic. And then anything after a fourth degree, we don't have a specific name. So we just call it the nth degree. So if there was like a 5 down here, we would say 5th degree. If there was a 6, we'd say 6th degree, and so on and so forth. We just continue to go down. So now in the number of terms, we have specific names for how many terms are there. So if there's only 1 term, like up above, I think it was, 3xy, we would call that a monomial. So there's only 1 term there. So mono, I think you guys learn in science, means 1. The term for 2, the name for 2 terms is binomial, because bi means 2. And then for 3, that's trinomial, because tri means 3. Hopefully you've learned that by now, and if you haven't, you're going to soon. Then anything after a 3, we just say poly, because that means more than 1. So polynomial would be our name for anything that's more than 3 terms. So now it's asking us to classify it by name down below. So first off, it's asking for the degree. So this degree is 8x to the first. So that degree is a 1. If we classify it by degree, we call that a linear expression. The number of terms, well, I see this minus sign, so that means it separates two terms at least. So there's 2 there, an 8x and a negative 4. So there's 2. And what do we call something that has 2 terms? Well, if we look right up above that, that is binomial. The second one down, I see a 2 for the biggest exponent, so that would be my degree. Anything that's raised to the second power in the table above, we use the word quadratic. The number of terms, we have this x squared, we have a plus 3x, and we have this plus 6. So there's 3 terms, and we call that a trinomial. And then the last one, it looks like my biggest degree that I see in there is this 3, and we call that cubic, according to the table up above. And then if we look at how many different terms there are, we have this one, we got this 5x squared, we got this negative x, and we have this minus 3. So it looks like there's 4 different terms, and for 4 or more, we just name that a polynomial. We don't have a specific name, just poly. Means more than 3 essentially in this case. Okay, so press pause if you need more time, and then we're going to go on to the next page. The next page is asking us to add or subtract polynomials. When we add or subtract, we want to put them in what's called standard form. And that just means from biggest to smallest exponent. As well as alphabetically. So we put it in alphabetical order from biggest to smallest exponent when we add them together. And then we'll name these too so you guys can see them a few more times. So if we take a look at this first one, right? So there's a plus sign in between these two. So this plus sign means we're not multiplying. It just means that we're adding the first binomial to the second binomial. And there's a 1 in front of that plus, or in front of the parentheses. So if we distribute the 1, there's nothing in front of the first parentheses, but there's just a plus 1 there. So that would give us 5x squared plus 6. So that means we just have to combine like terms. So we've done this last semester. If we combine like terms, we're just looking for things that are the same exact variable with the same exact exponent. So now we have this 3 and this 5, so that would give me 8. And we have this plus 4 and this plus 6, and that would give me plus 10. So in the end, I can't add the 8 and the 10 together because they don't have the same variable and exponent. So that'd be my answer, it would just be 8x squared plus 10. And then if I need to name this, the biggest degree that I see is a 2, so we'd call that a quadratic. And I look to see how many terms there are, and I see that there is 2 because there's just 1 plus sign separating them. So that'd be called a quadratic binomial. So that'd be my answer. Number 2, if we distribute this plus 1 into the parentheses, the first parentheses has nothing in front of it to distribute, but the second one just has the 1, so that it doesn't change anything. So now I'm going to combine like terms. I know that this x squared has a 1 in front, so I have 2 plus 1, and that would give me 3. I have this 4x and this 2x, and that would give me 6x. And I have this plus 3 and this plus 6, and that would give me plus 9. So now, if it asks me to name this, I see the biggest degree is a 2, so that's quadratic again. And I see that there's 3 terms in this case. So if there's 3, we call that a trinomial. So that would be my answer for number 2. Number 3, same idea. There's a plus 1 there. We distribute it in. so it doesn't change anything. So now we get plus 5t squared plus 4. So if we were to take a look at what we can combine, there's a 1 in front of this t squared. There's a 5 in front of this t squared, so 1 plus 5 gives me 6. And then I have this plus 3 and this plus 4, and that gives me plus 7. So I have 6t squared plus 7. I don't like that t. It looks like a plus sign to me. So I'm going to make it a capital T so that it's obvious. So now if we were to name that, same thing as the first one. I see a 2 up there for my biggest degree. So it's quadratic, and I see 2 terms. So we call that a binomial. So that'd be how I name it if they asked you to name it. All right, the next one is a binomial plus a trinomial. So the first parentheses doesn't have anything in front of it, so I don't have to distribute. This one has just this 1. When I distribute it in, it doesn't change anything. So now let's see what we can combine as far as like terms go. So I see this 3y to the 4th. I don't see any other y to the 4th, so I just bring it down. I see this 2y to the 3rd. I don't see any other y to the 3rd, so I bring that down. And I'm writing this in standard form. If you notice, all my answers so far have been alphabetical from biggest to smallest exponent, and then the number that's by itself is always last. I have this 9y squared and this 5 minus 5y squared. So those two I can actually combine. So if I combine those, 9 minus 5 would give me plus 4. And then I just have this plus 6y by itself. There's nothing to combine it to. So now that would be my answer if I combine those. And if it asks you to tell me what the name of that was, well, I see something to the 4th power, so I know that that's called quartic. And I see that there's 4 terms there. So 4 terms we call a polynomial. So that would be my answer, a quartic polynomial. So that's all my adding. Now let's do the subtraction one, okay? So now if we needed to subtract, we see that there's still a 1 there, and that means we got to distribute a minus 1. So there's nothing in the beginning in front of the first parentheses, but in the second one there's this minus 1. So that means that these signs would flip inside the second parentheses. So now it becomes negative 4 into the third minus 1n squared. Now we do the same thing where we combine like terms. So I have this 12 and this minus 4, and I get 8. Then I have this plus 3 and minus 1, and I get plus 2. So then from there, if it asks me to name that, anything to the 3rd power we call cubic. And there's 2 terms, so that's a binomial. Number 6 has a minus sign as well. That means that we got to distribute the negative into the second parenthesis. The first parenthesis I just drop down because there's nothing in front of it to combine it with. The second one, oopsie, I change it to a negative and a negative for both of them. So now I look to see what can combine. So I see a 22 can combine with a negative 4. So that'd give me 18. I see x to the 3rd can combine with this x to the 3rd. So that'd be 4 minus 3. That'd give me plus 1. And then I see this by itself. So I'm just going to bring down that x squared. If it asks me to name it, I see that it's to the 4th power. And I know anything to the 4th power we call quartic. There's 3 terms, so we call it a trinomial. So that would be my answer for number 6. Okay, yeah, I didn't think that there was anything else. I was like, oh, is there another page? And then the last 2, there's a minus sign for 7, so that means there's a negative 1 there. We distribute it in, and we get negative 2x squared plus x plus 6. I drop down the first parentheses. I look to see what we can combine now. So that'd be this 5 and this negative 2. That'd give me 3. This plus 3 and this plus 1 would give me plus 4. And then this plus 2 and this plus 6 would give me plus 8. So now if I were to name this to the second degree, that's my degree, that's quadratic. And then there's 3 terms, so that's a trinomial. Then the last one, there's a minus sign there as well. So I distribute that minus sign into the second parenthesis. The first parenthesis I just rewrite. So if I distribute that minus sign in, it would be minus 2n squared minus 3n. And then if I combine like terms, I have 8 minus 2, that gives me 6. And then I have minus 1 and minus 3, that gives me minus 4. So now if I were to name that to the second degree as quadratic, and then there's 2 terms, so that's a binomial. And that would be my answer for the last one. So today you learned how to classify these by name and then adding and subtracting. So those were the 2 goals that we had. I'll see you tomorrow for a little bit more polynomials.